The movie opens in Sweden, where a British family is headed for a vacation on an island called Svalta. The family consists of parents Richard and Susan Smith, their daughter Jessie, and son Sam. During the journey, Susan mentions that in 1824, the Svaltic Islanders quarantined themselves in fear of a deadly flu epidemic. This resulted in widespread famine, forcing the inhabitants to turn to cannibalism for survival. Although the quarantine was eventually lifted, the island's dark history gave birth to a unique tradition. Every 10 years, an 8-hour festival called Karantan, aka Quarantine, is held to honor their ancestors' sacrifices through theatrical performances. The family soon stops by a cafe near the coast, where the owner appears unwelcoming. While ordering food, Susan tries to make small talk, and asks if he has children, but the man responds rudely that they are dead. Meanwhile, Sam and Jessie explore the cafe, and discover a large seabird with its head grotesquely severed, and take a picture of it. Later, when the Smith family inquires about the ferry to Svalta, the cafe owner drops his plate in shock. He reveals that going there is forbidden during Karantan. He also mentions that there are no hotels on the island, but Richard responds by showing him the Airbnb they booked, from a man named Mats Larsson. Despite this, the cafe owner strongly advises them not to go, claiming that the islanders dislike visitors and may even eat them. But the family thinks the man is a joke, as they have come so far and are determined to witness Karantan. Moments later, they hear the distant sound of a ferry approaching and proceed to leave the cafe. The rude cafe owner once again warns Richard not to go to the island, but the latter appears unconcerned. The family then walks toward the dock and requests 4 tickets to Svalta, but even the ticket lady is utterly shocked upon hearing their destination. Here Richard realizes he left his wallet at the cafe, and goes back to retrieve it. Shortly after, he returns with the wallet, and the family excitedly boards the ferry. However, they get weirded out when the locals begin staring at them with a scary look. A bald, sinister-looking man then offers Susan a drink. Richard tries to intervene, but the man starts cursing him. Sometime later, the family lands on Svalta Island. But they are surprised to see that the entire community has gathered at the harbor. The islanders seem very unhappy, and their leader, Clara, asks who they are and why they are here. The family explains that they are on holiday, and have come to see the Karantan play. A young boy, Ingemar, claims they are not welcome, and asks them to leave immediately, but the family refuses. Susan even reveals that she has a personal connection to the island, as her ancestor was one of the brave officers killed by the islanders over 200 years ago. Upon hearing this, an angry Clara asks Susan to leave, but a man arrives to intervene, and he turns out to be Mats Larsson, their Airbnb host. The community becomes enraged when they learn that he rented out a house to foreigners. But Mats reveals that the house belongs to his mother, and he doesn't need permission from anyone. After some heated argument, Clara reluctantly allows the foreigners to stay, but warns that their stay will be brief. Following this, Mats takes the family to their rented Airbnb, and he seems to show interest in Jessie.
Don't be scared.
The creepy guy then discloses that this was his mother's house, and that she was beheaded and murdered 10 years ago in the same chair where Richard is sitting now. Hearing this, the family is a bit surprised. After Mats leaves, the overly chill family begins unpacking, and Jessie takes a bath to relax. But during this time, she hears strange noises. She hears strange noises coming from the mirror on the wall, but can't figure out what it is. Later that night, the family's sleep is disturbed by a nearby commotion. Richard and Susan go outside, only to notice the islanders gathered with torches afire. Worried, Susan begs them to stop the harassment, as her children are sleeping inside, but one of the islanders throws a raccoon's carcass on the doorstep, before they finally leave. This freaks out the couple, and they start wondering if they made a mistake coming here. Here we also notice that the couple is being watched by the leader Clara. The next morning, one day until Karantan, Jessie shares with her dad that she feels someone is watching her around the house. The scared girl heard noises coming from behind a huge mirror while taking a bath. Unbeknownst to them, someone is spying on them from a room full of monitors showing CCTV footage. Sometime later, Richard goes to Mott's house and tells him about what happened the previous night. He also hands him the dead raccoon that the islanders threw at them. Richard expresses his frustration, claiming that despite Mott's promises, they have only felt threatened and unwelcome since their arrival. He's going to write a negative review about the place, and Mott is worried, so he promises to discuss the matter with the community. In the afternoon, the Smith family explores the island and takes some pictures. Surprisingly, in another scene, we see that the cafe owner from the coast has been brutally murdered, along with his wife. Meanwhile, Richard and Susan see boats bringing 4 empty coffins to the island, which confuses them. Sometime later, a detective named Forsberg arrives on the island and speaks with a harbor attendant. He informs her about the death of the cafe owner, and suspects that a man named Johan may be involved. It turns out that Johan is the same bald guy from the ferry, and he is a dangerous convict who has just been released from prison. The officer assumes that he is out for more murders, and so the community must be warned. Elsewhere, we see Susan and Richard being intimate in their Airbnb house, but someone is creepily watching them through a camera and pleasuring himself. On the other hand, the islanders are seen rehearsing for Karantan when they are interrupted by Detective Forsberg. He inquires about Johan, and finds out that he has left the island to buy vodka. Clara then tells Forsberg not to come here because outside jurisdiction does not apply here, and Karantan serves as the judge. But the detective instead warns her to be careful if she wants her head intact on her body. As Forsberg departs later, we see Johan watching him from a distance. Meanwhile, Sam and Jesse head to the local cafe, where the owner turns out to be Ingemar. He tells them that they made a big mistake coming here, but the siblings do not appear threatened, and reveal that they only came because their parents wanted to see a stupid play. When one of the locals touches Sam, he quickly throws sprinkles into his eyes. The siblings then come across islanders wearing strange masks, and carrying several coffins labeled English Liar. This scares the shit out of the duo. Elsewhere, we see a creepy Mott wearing women's undergarments in a bed. But when the siblings arrive at the house, he quickly runs away from there. Jessie soon notices that her bed is crinkled, and her underwear is also missing. The girl then approaches a mirror inside her room, and draws a heart on it. And then, on the other side, meanwhile, we see Clara discussing the preparation for Karantan with the islanders. She claims that this is her final year directing the play, and wants to leave it on an epic note. It turns out that during Karantan, their forefathers honored the dead by bringing in outsiders and sacrificing them. However, the younger generation doesn't like such bloodshed, so it hasn't happened in the past 30 years. Clara then declares that now that the opportunity has presented itself, they must kill and eat the English people to honor their tradition. This terrifies the locals, and Ingemar protests, saying he thought they were just scaring the outsiders. Even Clara's son, Sven, is against her, but the woman insists they will have to obey whatever she tells them to do. In the evening, Clara approaches Mott to convince him of her wicked plan. He is hesitant to get involved in murder, so Clara suddenly admits that she is aware of his perversion, and how he violates the rules by bringing outsiders into their island. However, they have always turned a blind eye to him because he is one of their people. Clara claims that it is now his responsibility to repay the community for their tolerance toward him, so Mott has no choice but to comply. The next day, it is finally the day of Karantan, and a masked man begins the ceremony by playing a drum, while the locals gather around. On the other hand, Mott approaches the Smiths family, and has brought cookies for them. He reveals that he spoke with the community, and they have invited them to attend the play. But to his surprise, the Smiths family reveals that they are heading to swim in the harbor, and aren't interested in the play. They claim that they can't sit for 8 hours and will come for the climax instead, which disappoints Mott. Elsewhere, the play finally begins, recounting the events of 200 years ago, when the island received word of a plague spreading throughout the outside world. The island leader thus had no option but to quarantine the harbor to protect themselves. They trusted the English people to inform them when the disease was over, but the plague continued for quite some time. As a result, people began to starve to death, and eventually resorted to eating each other. In the meantime, the Smiths family returns to the house after their swim. They notice the plate of cookies left by Mott, and eagerly begin eating. Unfortunately, the cookies turn out to be drugged, and they immediately pass out, while Mats watches with satisfaction. Returning to Karantan, the play reveals that the islanders eventually realized the English had been deceiving them, and there was no disease in reality. This enraged the villagers, who had lost their families to famine and cannibalism. They therefore banded together against the Englishmen, and killed them in cold blood. In another scene, we see Mats wearing Jessie undergarments, and preparing to assault her. But in a shocking turn of events, it is revealed that the Smiths family never ate the drugged cookies, and they stab Mats repeatedly until he is dead. We also learn that it was Richard who killed the cafe owner when he went back to retrieve his wallet. Furthermore, Jessie and Sam were the ones who decapitated the seabird at the cafe. It turns out the Smiths are not an ordinary family, but a group of serial killers who infiltrate isolated communities to satisfy their bloodlust. Following this, the Smiths arm themselves with additional weapons, and begin rampaging across the island, killing anyone they encounter in brutal manners. Clara and her group see this from a distance, but they are unaware of the identity of the attackers. However, the old woman is still adamant on completing the Karantan, as it is her last one. The other villagers meanwhile, run around in panic, and assume that Johan is responsible for the killings. Afterward, Jessie and Sam head to the port, and approach the guard station there. They pretend to be terrified victims, and when the worried woman hugs them, the siblings finish her off. Up next, they even take a photo of themselves with her body. Sometime later, Sven arrives at the port and is horrified to discover the lifeless guard. He quickly grabs a flare gun and fires it into the sky, illuminating the night with a bright red glow. Upon seeing the flare, Richard and Susan realize that the cops will soon arrive, but they remain unfazed while casually singing a song. Meanwhile, the surviving locals, including Clara and Sven, hide in a small hut to escape the attackers. The Smiths try to break into the hut, but the door is locked. Richard then stabs through the wooden panels and injures Clara, but even now the old woman doesn't know who their attackers are. At one point, Richard is also stabbed by Sven, but despite the brutal wound, he seems to be fine. The family eventually breaks into the hut, but Clara and Sven have already managed to escape by this time, leaving the others to deal with these psychos. The Smiths mercilessly continue killing the islanders, including the young boy, Ingemar.
That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Elsewhere, Detective Forsberg receives a call about the massacre on the island. The other officer informs him that Johan has been spotted on the island and is suspected of being behind the massacre. After killing almost everyone, the Smiths gather the bodies, setting them ablaze. Richard and Susan discuss how the smell of burnt human corpses reminds them of their honeymoon. During this, Sam has another argument with his father for no apparent reason, and this enrages Dad so much that he shockingly stabs Sam in the neck and kills him. Susan and Jessie casually ask Richard why he did that, but the man says that he had to do it because Sam had been showing him attitude throughout the entire trip. To our surprise, Jessie states that she now has to find another person to pose as her brother, which reveals that Sam was never a member of the family, but rather a hired killer. On the other hand, Sven urges his mother to flee the island, but she insists on completing the ritual as it's her last Karantan. This leaves him with no choice but to help her, and he leaves to get his shotgun from their home. Meanwhile, the Smith family arrives at Mott's place, and discovers a room filled with CCTV cameras. They are disgusted that he had been spying on them. They also discover a secret door leading to their Airbnb house, and Richard decides to go through the passage. Shortly after, Jessie enters the Airbnb house through the front door, but is immediately shot by Sven. Despite the injury, she pretends to be the victim, and informs Sven and Clara that Mats Larsson went insane, and murdered her brother and dad. Jessie claims that Mats might still be in the house, so Sven grabs his shotgun and heads upstairs to search for him. Meanwhile, Clara continues to doubt Jessie, but Jessie's vulnerable and innocent demeanor eventually convinces her. Moments later, Susan bursts through the door, and the mother and daughter act out a dramatic scene. On the other hand, Sven is wandering around the house and enters Jessie's room, and this is when he comes across Mott's mutilated body. He realizes Jesse was lying to him. He then moves forward, and discovers Richard lying in another room. But then, Richard suddenly slashes his neck, and the poor guy blows Richard's hand off before passing away. Following this, Richard heads downstairs with his mutilated hand. The family finally drops the act, and reveals that they are the ones responsible for the massacre. The revelation enrages Clara, and she accuses the British of being great deceivers, claiming that history was only repeating itself. She also holds a knife, but is unexpectedly shot in the head by Detective Forsberg, who mistakenly thought that Clara was attacking the innocent tourists. While pretending to be victims, the Smiths are led to the port to leave this island. Johan, who has no idea what happened, awakens from his sleep on a nearby boat. The cops believe he's behind the massacre and shoot him dead upon seeing him. Before the film ends, Richard states, "The family that slays together stays together."